Have you ever wondered how you can take your research papers to the next level? I'm Katie Wills, and in this video I'll teach you the tools and the tricks to find good information to elevate those papers, because great research makes regular research papers into rockin' research papers. The most important thing about your research paper is, well, your research. If your research is bad, your paper is bad. It's best to pick primary resources because those are the most credible sources. And there's also a lot of information out there, so it's important to be really specific. Pick a topic that you really like. If you're assigned a topic in class, find something even more specific of something that you like. For example, like in class, if I was assigned to write a paper on Egyptian pharaohs, I would want to pick a pharaoh that I thought was boss, or like the coolest pharaoh ever. So who I would pick probably would be Cleopatra. There can be a lot of information on someone's life. That's why it's important to know what their good sources to use. A good source to use is a primary resource. According to dictionary.com, a primary resource is an original, fundamental, and authoritative document pertaining to an event or subject of inquiry, a first-hand eyewitness account of an event. In plain English, it just means that a source from somebody who was there, or who was close enough to the time that they can be made credible. Before deciding a source is credible, even if it's a primary resource, we have to check these questions. When was this written? Was it written recently? Usually recent sources are good, especially if you're doing a current event. But in this case, we want to find something that's either close to time or from this time right now. Let's say within the last 5 years, or within 1,000 years of Cleopatra. Who wrote it is the second question. It's really important to know if this is actually a professor that's writing it, or if it's some guy in their basement, or a second grader. What are their credentials? Credentials are the people that, it's like their degree, what they have. It's usually listed in the back of books or on their sources at the bottom of pages. Is this peer reviewed? This means that did other scholars, and did other legitimate people look at this, or was it just published without even checking to make sure everything's accurate? And the last one is, do they have any bias? If they do have bias, sometimes there's going to be bias. You want to try to get something that's as unbiased as possible, but if there is, just make sure that you recognize the bias. A primary source for Cleopatra is a tough one. So much of her life was muddled in myth. You can't really separate the fact from the fiction a lot of times. So basically credibility is pretty hard to find. But the go-to guy that you want to go to is this cat named Plutarch. He was the guy to go to for everything historical for Grecian or Roman history. So now that I've done some base research on Cleopatra, I've figured out a topic that I would want to do that's more narrow. I've also limited my amount of sources. You really want to have at least 3 sources in your research papers to just give other options and just other places where you can find it. The topic that I've decided to choose and to focus on for Cleopatra is her famed beauty. Was it really pristine in actuality, or was it just a political guise for people to like her or to not like her? So the other books that I have are William Shakespeare's play on the tragedy of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, Plutarch's Lives, and this book, which is a newer book called Cleopatra: A Life by Stacy Sheaf. The reason why I know that this is a good source is because it was recommended to me on the Cincinnati Museum website for Cleopatra. Also, too, we'll have to look at our primary source checklist and what makes a good primary source author. Another great resource for your primary sources is your library website. This makes it really easy and actually really accessible online. You can go on to, they can link you to Google Books, it can get you to scholarly journals, newspaper articles, interviews, documented speeches, a ton of different things, all in one source that you can actually print out a lot of times on just a PDF. When using quotes, I like to use the metaphor of like a leftover steak. What a leftover steak is, when it's on a plate, it's just a piece of meat, and it's just leftovers. What you want is, that meat is your information, that's your opinion, and that's what you put in your paper. The mashed potatoes that are on the side makes that leftover piece of meat a meal. The mashed potatoes are your quotes. It's a small portion that puts a little bit of more prestige to your paper. If you have a quote that's longer than 3 lines, we need to follow the MLA format. What that does, it looks a little bit like this. This right here is a paragraph quote. This is the incorrect way how to do it. how you do a paragraph long quote is that if it's 3 lines or more, you go to the second page, you indent the whole quote together, and you make it single spaced. So this is the correct way. And the next sentence after should start in the same indent point as the beginning, unless you're starting a new paragraph. Try not to end a paragraph with a quote. It just makes the flow really weird. And if you look at it this way, it looks like the quote there is still a part of it. When in doubt, cite it out. Always cite your resources and always cite your quotes immediately after. That's what I like to do so I don't forget it. What I'll do is that right afterwards for the MLA format, you don't put a period, you put an end quotation, and then in parentheses, you put the author's name first, then the page number, in parentheses, and then period. Now, to add a little fun and flair to the end of this video, which I hope you enjoyed, I'm actually adding a YouTube video that was made by history teachers. This is called the History Teacher YouTube channel. These are made by history teachers just like me in high school that use modern songs and make them into historically credible music videos. So, enjoy the Cleopatra video.
4, 3, 2, 1. Listen up, students of history. Cleopatra the Seventh is the pharaoh to be.
Pharaohlicious definition make them Romans angry. They want Egypt's treasures and get pleasures from my greenies. From Ptolemy's dynasty, not pretty but I'm witty. Really Greek and not Egyptian, but I speak it with precision. Cleopatra, Palace at Alexandria. What does it matter if your siblings plot against you? I like to flatter. Hey boy, important men like Caesar. He's the most powerful leader, and with me he was a cheater. So suspicious.
Yes, I wasn't my bro.
My bro was vicious.
I needed Caesar alone.
But I'm ambitious.
From the rugged he goes.
I'm pharaohlicious.